The great hall of Thornmoor Castle hummed with the tension of wolves trying to coexist. Servants rushed between tables bearing platters of roasted meat and wine, while nobles discussed the upcoming treaty that would unite the northern and southern packs after decades of war. Alara knelt in the corner, scrubbing wine stains from the stone floor with hands already raw from a day's work. She was 26 years old, and with dark hair she kept in a tight braid and amber eyes that had learned to stay lowered. She wore the gray uniform of the lowest servants, the Omegas who were considered too weak, too worthless to do anything but clean. "Don't make eye contact with the High Court," the head servant had warned her on her first day. "Don't speak unless spoken to, and whatever you do, stay invisible. Omegas are tolerated here only because someone has to scrub the floors." Alara had learned quickly that tolerated meant despised, that invisible meant forgotten. She'd been born into a small border pack, the daughter of healers who'd died during the war. When her pack was absorbed into the Thornmoor territory, she'd been brought to the castle as part of the spoils. An Omega with no family, no status, no value beyond her ability to work. For 5 years, she'd scrubbed floors, emptied chamber pots, and pretended she was deaf to the insults thrown her way. It was survival. Nothing more. But tonight was different. Tonight, the entire court had gathered for the most important event in a generation. The treaty signing between Alpha King Dominic of the North and Alpha Lord Victor of the South. It would end the war. It would bring peace. And Alara, kneeling on the cold stone floor, understood every word of the Southern tongue being spoken at the high table. And her mother had been Southern before the war. She'd taught Alara the language in secret, knowing that bilingual servants were sometimes given better positions. But after her mother's death, Alara had buried that knowledge deep. Being useful was dangerous for an Omega. It drew attention, and attention led to cruelty. Now she scrubbed the floor near the high table, trying to ignore the familiar cadence of her mother's language filling the hall. The Southern delegation had arrived that morning, 20 warriors, 10 advisors, and Alpha Lord Victor himself, a broad-shouldered man with silver streaks in his dark hair and eyes like winter ice. But it was the man seated at the center of the high table who commanded every eye in the room. Alpha King Dominic. He was impossible to ignore, 6.5 feet of raw dominance, with shoulders that seemed to fill doorways, and a presence that made the very air feel charged. He had dark hair, a strong jaw marked with a scar from battle, and eyes the color of steel. He'd taken the throne 3 years ago after leading the northern forces to victory. Since then, he'd been consolidating power, rebuilding what the war had destroyed, and now, finally, making peace. Alara kept her head down, her hands moving mechanically across the stone. She was good at being invisible. She'd had years of practice, until she heard it. The translator was speaking. Marcus Hale sat beside the king, dressed in fine clothes that marked him as someone important. He was the official court translator, hand-picked to facilitate communication between the two alphas who didn't share a common tongue. Victor spoke in the Southern language, his voice carrying through the hall. "The terms you propose are unacceptable. The territory division gives you the river valleys, our most fertile lands. We agreed this would be equal." Alara's hands stilled. She understood perfectly. Victor was objecting that this was a serious complaint that could derail the entire treaty. Marcus translated for King Dominic. "Lord Victor says he's honored by your generosity and accepts the territorial terms with gratitude." Alara's blood ran cold. That wasn't what Victor had said. Not even close. She forced herself to keep scrubbing, but her heart was hammering. Maybe she'd misheard. Maybe the Southern tongue had changed during the war. Maybe. Victor spoke again, this time with clear frustration. "I must insist on renegotiating the mineral rights clause. Your draft gives the North exclusive access to the silver mines. That was never our agreement." Marcus smiled and translated, "He's pleased with the mining arrangements, and has no objections." Alara's hands were shaking now. This wasn't a mistake. Marcus was lying. deliberately changing Victor's words to make him seem compliant when he was actually protesting. She risked a glance at the high table, as King Dominic was nodding, looking satisfied. Victor looked confused. He'd raised a complaint and received nothing. No response. No acknowledgement. The king didn't understand Southern. He had no way of knowing his translator was betraying him. Alara's mind raced. She should stay quiet. Should keep scrubbing. This wasn't her business. She was an Omega, less than nothing in the eyes of these powerful men. If she spoke up, they'd punish her for the audacity of interrupting. But her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Words are bridges, little one. When someone breaks a bridge, people fall. And it's always the innocent who fall first. The negotiation continued. Victor raised objection after objection, about borders, about trade routes, about the treatment of southern wolves who would now live under northern rule. Every single complaint was translated as agreement. Marcus was systematically ensuring that Victor would sign a treaty that gave everything to the north and nothing to the south. A treaty that looked like peace, but was actually surrender. Alara set down her scrub brush. Her hands were steady now, the steadiness that comes after fear when the decision has already been made. She stood up. The room didn't notice immediately. Servants moved through the hall constantly. One more figure rising wasn't remarkable, but then she walked toward the high table. That got attention. Conversations faltered. Nobles turned to stare. A servant, an Omega servant, was approaching the Alpha King's table without permission. The head servant, Gerald, made a strangled sound of horror. "Ilara, get back to—" She ignored him. Every step felt like walking through water, but she kept moving. King Dominic's steel-gray eyes locked onto her. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze sharpened, intensified. Alara stopped 3 paces from the table. Protocol demanded she kneel, but she remained standing. She needed him to hear her, to see her as more than a servant. "Your Majesty," she said, and her voice carried through the now silent hall. "Your translator is lying." The words fell like stones into still water. Marcus Hale went pale. "This is outrageous. Remove this servant." "Silence." King Dominic's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. His eyes never left Alara's face. "Explain." Alara's heart hammered, but she lifted her chin. "Lord Victor has been raising objections to the treaty terms for the past 20 minutes. He's protested the territorial divisions, the mining rights, the border placements. Your translator has been telling you that Victor accepts everything when he actually agrees to nothing." The hall erupted. Nobles shouted. Marcus stood, face flushed with rage. "She's lying. A lowly Omega trying to sabotage." "I said silence." This time, the king's alpha command rolled through the room like thunder. Every wolf felt the weight of it, the absolute authority. Everyone went quiet. King Dominic stood. The movement was controlled, deliberate. He was even more imposing on his feet. A wall of power and barely restrained danger. "You understand the Southern tongue?" he asked Alara. "Yes, Your Majesty. My mother was Southern. She taught me before she died." "And you're certain of what you heard?" "Completely certain, Your Majesty." The king turned to Victor, who'd been watching the exchange with obvious confusion. Then, to everyone's shock, King Dominic spoke a halting phrase in the Southern language. The pronunciation was rough, the grammar broken, but the meaning was clear. "Forgive." "She speaks true?" Victor's eyes widened. He looked at Alara, then back at the king, and responded in Southern. "Yes. By the gods, yes. I've been trying to renegotiate for the past hour and getting nowhere," Alara translated without being asked. "He says yes, Your Majesty. He's been trying to negotiate and hasn't been heard." King Dominic's expression went absolutely cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned to Marcus Hale. "Explain." Marcus's mouth opened and closed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Your Majesty, there's been a misunderstanding. The southern dialect is complex. Did Lord Victor object to the territorial terms? The nuances of translation, yes or no? Marcus swallowed. He expressed some concern, but I judged it minor. You judged. The king's voice was lethal. You were hired to translate, not to judge. Not to decide which of Lord Victor's words I should hear. He turned to his captain of the guard. Remove him. Detain him until I decide what charges to bring. As guards moved forward, Marcus made one last desperate attempt. Your Majesty, you can't trust the word of an Omega over mine. She's nothing. A servant. She probably can't even... The king moved faster than Alara had ever seen a man move. One moment he was at the table. The next, he had Marcus by the throat, lifting him off his feet. She is a person who told me the truth when you were selling me lies. His voice was death itself. That makes her worth more than you'll ever be. He dropped Marcus, who collapsed, gasping. The guards dragged him away. The silence in the hall was absolute. King Dominic turned back to Alara. His expression was still hard, dangerous. But when he looked at her, something shifted. What's your name? Ilara, Your Majesty. Ilara. He said it like he was committing it to memory. You speak both Northern and Southern fluently? Yes, Your Majesty. And you've been scrubbing floors instead of serving as a translator because I'm an Omega, Your Majesty. Omegas aren't given positions of importance. Something flickered across the king's face, anger, but not at her. That changes now. You will serve as the official translator for this negotiation. Your word will carry the weight of my authority. Anyone who questions you questions me. Understood? Alara's knees went weak. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified. You just saved this treaty from sabotage. You're more qualified than anyone in this room. He gestured to the empty chair beside his own, the one Marcus had occupied. Sit. Your Majesty, I can't. Servants didn't sit at the high table. Omegas certainly didn't sit beside the king. That's an order. His eyes held hers, steel gray and absolutely unwavering. Ilara sat. The chair was more comfortable than anything she'd ever touched. The wine goblet beside it was made of silver. The plate bore the royal crest. King Dominic sat beside her and turned to Victor. Lord Victor, I apologize. I was told you accepted my terms. I would like to hear your actual concerns. All of them. With proper translation this time. He looked at Alara. Please. And for the first time in 5 years, Alara wasn't invisible. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe. It helps these stories reach more people who need them. The negotiation lasted until midnight. Victor raised every complaint he'd tried to voice before. Alara translated each one with precision. Not softening, not editing, just conveying the truth from one language to another. The territorial divisions were renegotiated. The mining rights were split fairly. The border placements were adjusted to protect both sides. King Dominic proved to be a completely different negotiator when he actually understood what was being said. He was firm, but fair, so listening to Victor's concerns and offering alternatives that addressed them. By the time the revised treaty was drafted, both alphas looked satisfied. Victor stood and spoke in Southern. King Dominic, I came here expecting to sign my pax surrender disguised as peace. Instead, I'm signing an actual partnership. Thank you for your integrity, Alara translated. King Dominic smiled, a real smile that transformed his stern face. Thank you for your patience, Lord Victor. And thank Alara. Without her courage, we'd both be making a terrible mistake. Victor looked at Alara and bowed. Actually bowed to an Omega. The South owes you a debt, young woman. When the Southern delegation left for their guest quarters, King Dominic remained seated. The hall had emptied. Even the servants had withdrawn, leaving only the king and Alara at the high table. You didn't have to speak, he said quietly. You could have stayed silent, finished your work and gone to bed. No one would have blamed you. I would have blamed myself, Your Majesty. Why? This wasn't your responsibility. Because I knew the truth. And staying silent when you know the truth is just another way of lying. King Dominic studied her for a long moment. Who taught you that? My mother, before she died. What happened to her? Alara's throat tightened. She was a healer. During the war, she treated wounded from both sides. Some northern soldiers didn't like that she helped southern wolves. They killed her for it. Said she was a traitor. The king's expression darkened. How old were you? 16. I'm sorry. That should never have happened. It's war, Your Majesty. Terrible things happen in war. That doesn't make them acceptable. He leaned forward. Ilara, I need to ask you something. And I want an honest answer. She nodded. Why are you here? An Omega who speaks 2 languages fluently, who was raised by healers, who has the courage to interrupt an Alpha King during treaty negotiations. Why are you scrubbing floors? Ilara looked at her hands. Raw, scarred, the hands of someone who'd spent 5 years on her knees. Because after my mother died, my pack was absorbed into Thornmoor. The Alpha here didn't know what to do with an orphaned Omega, so he assigned me to the servants. I've been here ever since. Doing work far beneath your abilities. Doing the only work Omegas are allowed to do. King Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then, that changes. Tonight. You're not a floor servant anymore. Your Majesty, you're the royal translator. You'll have quarters in the castle proper. A salary. Respect. His eyes held hers. And anyone who treats you as less than you are will answer to me personally. Alara's eyes burned. Why? Why would you do this for me? Because you saved my kingdom from signing away its future. Because you had nothing to gain and everything to lose by speaking up. And you did it anyway. He paused. And because I've been a king for 3 years, and I'm tired of people telling me what they think I want to hear instead of the truth. You're the first person in a long time who's been honest with me. I'm just an Omega. You're a person who speaks the truth. That makes you rarer than any title. He stood. Come, I'll show you to your new quarters. Tonight? Right now. You're not spending another night in the servants' barracks. As they walked through the castle corridors, Ilara was acutely aware of every eye that followed them. Servants stopped their work to stare. Guards whispered. The Omega who'd interrupted the king, who'd sat at his table, who now walked beside him like an equal. King Dominic led her to a room in the noble's wing. It had a real bed with soft blankets, a writing desk, a window overlooking the gardens. This is too much, Ilara whispered. This is appropriate for someone of your position. He paused at the doorway. Ilara, I want you to know something. What happened tonight? Marcus's betrayal? It could have destroyed the peace. Thousands could have died if that treaty had been signed with false terms. You prevented that. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. I just spoke up. That's what heroes do. His voice was soft. Sleep well. Tomorrow we have a treaty to finalize, and I'll need my translator beside me. He left before she could respond. Ilara stood in the center of her new room, still wearing her gray servant's dress, and felt the weight of the day crash over her. 6 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was the royal translator. 6 hours ago, she'd been nothing. Now the king himself had called her a hero. She sat on the bed. Her bed. And for the first time in 5 years, Ilara allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from the sudden, overwhelming sensation of being seen after years of forced invisibility. And somewhere in the castle, King Dominic stood at his own window, thinking about an Omega with amber eyes who'd had the courage to challenge a king's translator and save a kingdom. 6 months later, the treaty between North and South had held strong. Trade flourished, and borders were peaceful. The 2 packs were slowly learning to trust each other, and Ilara had become indispensable. She translated every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every correspondence between King Dominic and Lord Victor. Her fluency in both languages made her the bridge between two peoples who were learning to be one. But she'd also become something else. The king's constant companion. It started professionally. He needed a translator at his side for meetings. But somehow, those meetings stretched into walks in the garden where they'd discuss philosophy and politics, into dinners where they'd debate strategy and history, into quiet evenings in the library where they'd simply enjoy comfortable silence. Ilara had never felt anything like this, the way her heart raced when he smiled at her, the way his presence made her feel safe and seen, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was precious. But she was an Omega, and he was a king. It was impossible. One evening, Dominic found her in the library, staring at a book without reading it. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Nothing, Your Majesty." "Ilara." His voice was gentle. "We've known each other for 6 months. You can tell me the truth." She set down the book. "The court is talking. About us. About how much time we spend together. Let them talk. They're saying I'm using you, that I'm manipulating you for my own gain, that I'm—" She couldn't finish. "That you're what?" "That I'm not worthy of your attention." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're right." Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked her. He took her hand. "Ilara, do you know why I value your company so much?" She shook her head. "Because you're real. Everyone else in this castle tells me what they think I want to hear. You tell me what I need to hear. You challenge me. You make me think. You make me—" He paused. "You make me want to be better than I am. Your Majesty—" "Dominic, please, when it's just us, call me Dominic." "I can't. That wouldn't be appropriate. Nothing about what I feel for you is appropriate." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But it's real, and I'm tired of pretending it's not." Ilara's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 6 months ago, an Omega had the courage to stand before a king and speak the truth. And every day since then, I've been falling in love with her." Tears blurred her vision. "You can't. You're intelligent, brave, honest, kind." His eyes held hers. "You're everything I could want. Everything I need. The court will never accept it. An Omega as what? As my equal? As someone worthy of respect?" His voice hardened. "Then the court can adjust their expectations, because I'm not giving you up." He stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Ilara, I'm asking you formally, not as your king, as a man who's fallen in love with an extraordinary woman. Will you let me court you?" She looked up at him. This powerful alpha who could command armies but was asking, not commanding. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, like she was precious. And Ilara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 1 year later. The great hall of Thornmoor Castle was filled to capacity. Nobles from every pack, or diplomats from distant territories, servants and soldiers and common folk, all gathered to witness something unprecedented. King Dominic was taking a mate. Ilara stood in the chamber beside the hall, wearing a gown of deep blue that made her amber eyes glow. Her hair was unbound for the first time in years, falling in dark waves down her back. She was terrified. A knock at the door. Lord Victor entered, smiling. "The king sent me to escort you. He said he trusts me not to let you flee." Ilara laughed nervously. "Is it that obvious? You're about to become queen. Anyone would be nervous." He offered his arm. "But I've known Dominic for over a year now. I've seen how he looks at you. That man would burn the world for you. I'm just an Omega. You're the woman who saved 2 kingdoms from war. You're the bridge between North and South. You're the person the king trusts above all others." Victor's expression was kind. "You're not just anything, Ilara. You're extraordinary. and it's time you believed that." They walked to the great hall. The doors opened. Every eye turned to her. She saw faces from her past, servants who'd ignored her, nobles who'd looked through her, the head servant who'd once told her she'd never be more than a floor scrubber. But she also saw new faces, children she'd taught to read, soldiers she'd helped communicate with Southern allies, common folk who'd benefited from the peace she'd helped broker. And at the end of the aisle, standing tall and proud, was Dominic. When their eyes met, he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still took her breath away. She walked to him, and when Victor placed her hand in Dominic's, the king whispered, "You're beautiful." "I'm terrified," she whispered back. "Good. So am I. We'll be terrified together." The ceremony was simple but profound. Ancient words spoken before witnesses, is promises made before the gods. When Dominic kissed her, sealing their bond, the crowd erupted in genuine celebration. And when he turned to face his kingdom, holding her hand, he spoke with absolute authority. "This woman saved my kingdom by speaking a truth no one else dared to voice. She's proven herself braver, wiser, and more honorable than any noble in this hall. She is my queen, my mate, my equal, and anyone who treats her as less will answer to me." No one argued. Later, at the feast, Alara found Victor alone on a balcony. "Thank you," she said, "for escorting me, for everything." "Thank you for preventing a war," he smiled, "and for teaching a stubborn northern king that worth isn't measured by birth rank." He taught himself that. No, you taught him. By being exactly who you are. That night, as Alara and Dominic stood together watching their united kingdom celebrate, he pulled her close. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About what?" "About speaking up that night, or about everything that came after." Alara thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, forgotten, convinced she was worthless. And she thought about who she'd become, a queen, a bridge builder, a woman who'd learned her own worth. "No regrets," she said. "Not a single one." "Good," he kissed her temple, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. You already have." And under the stars, in a castle that had once been her prison, Alara, former servant, if former nobody, now queen, finally understood what her mother had meant. Words are bridges, and sometimes one honest word spoken at the right moment can change everything. The end. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe. It helps more people find these tales of courage and love.